Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center. And if you like big knives, but your pocket space is at a premium, this video is for you because we've got some big and tall knives for easy EDC. Let's get into it. All right, so in this vid, I'm gonna introduce you to a little bit of knife slang, which you probably haven't heard of before. And I only say that because, as far as we can tell, it's primarily an internal thing that we use here at the Knife Center to talk about certain things, and that's the Big Easy knife. And what it is essentially a way to differentiate between knives that are big and overbuilt versus knives that are big but don't have that same kind of chunky nature that an overbuilt knife tends to have. And it's a pretty small segment, actually. It's compared to the broader spectrum, I should say, because when you do that Venn diagram of big knives and overbuilt knives, that center section is going to be pretty large. But here's a perfect example of what we're not talking about in this video, the Cold Steel 4MAX. We've got a 4-inch blade here, S35 in this case, big old triad lock, thick, chunky handles. There's certainly chunkier knives than this out there, but this is a great example. Phenomenal knife, don't get me wrong, but not what we're looking at today. Because if you choose to carry this knife, it truly is a bit of a commitment. Like, you have to really dedicate a lot of pocket space for that. But Cold Steel's great at big knives, not just big, chunky knives, big, easy knives too. It would make sense that they would lead off this video. Check out the Range Boss. This is a great example of a big, easy knife, and an affordable one too. It's like $45. We've got a full 4-inch blade here, synthetic GFN handles. Look how slim those are. Gonna have a very easy time carrying that in the pocket for sure. This, despite having roughly the same amount of sharpened edge as the 4MAX, is a much smaller commitment when you dedicate pocket space to this particular knife. And they both contain the same lock. Obviously, you're not going to get as premium a steel with the what's the name of this knife? The Range Boss. Sorry about that. But look, I mean, virtually the same amount of sharpened edge. You'll have to hone it up more frequently for sure, but you've essentially got the same reach with this particular knife, and you've still got the strong triad lock as well for this guy. Very nice knife, especially for an affordable option. Now, this is just kind of one way to do a big, easy knife, longer and slimmer like this, because we kind of break this down into a couple other different kind of subcategories as well. Because a big, easy knife could also refer to something like Cold Steel's Code 4, nice and slim with aluminum handles, or the less talked about, but perhaps even more appropriate for this video, the Silver Eye. Only about a 3.5-inch blade on these knives, so it's not super huge, but it still feels like a bit of a bigger knife. And rather than being long and narrow, this is more wide when closed, but in order to kind of counteract that, the handles have to stay nice and slim for it to still be, in our minds, a big, easy knife. And the lighter weight carbon fiber makes this one kind of pull ahead of the Code 4 a little bit. Price-wise, it's a fair bit more expensive too, though, about $230 compared to the Code 4's $107. Definitely a much better bargain for the Code 4. But the carbon fiber handles give you plenty to hold on to. You've got some aggressive finger guards, so you can put this to some bigger knife work and then slip it into the pocket nice and easily. S35 blade, easy opening with that open thumb stud right there, triad lock, reversible pocket clip, nice and slim in the pocket. And these are probably even the most rarest segment of the big, easy knife, is this wide and flat knife, because the wider a design tends to get, they tend to lean into the overbuilt category a little bit more. Here's another one that I think really does a nice job, the Kansept Hellx. Super broad blade, Mikkel-Wilhelmsen design. This knife comes in just a couple bucks, just a little bit under $200 right now. S35 VN blade, 3.6 inches broad. That is a big blade. The handles, titanium, not so thick that they get too thick for this category, especially because they kind of taper down at the back a little bit too. Folds up fairly wide, but fairly flat in the pocket. Ball bearings in the pivot, nice flipping action overall. Super solid blade, really slicey. That's another thing that's really cool about some of these big easy knives, is because they don't go super overbuilt and can still have these big wide blades, they tend not to have the thickest blade stock. They're a little bit on the thinner side, which is a good thing because you get awesome slicing out of these blades too. High flat grind here, appropriately thick or thin blade stock, really great combination. Next kind of, we'll get back to some of the narrower knives here that we call big easy knives. And unlike the wide flat ones, I think some of these can get away with having a little bit more girth on the handles than those other designs because they're so narrow. And perfect example of this is the Bestech Swordfish. Comes in about 52 bucks for a D2 bladed version, or about $90 for these KnifeCenter exclusives with S35 VN steel. Black coated right now. We do have a satin version that's been out of stock for a while, but if you've been waiting on one of those, like a long pre-order or something, like, they are coming back. I'm just not sure exactly when, unfortunately. But this is a fantastic example. 4-inch blade, S35 VN or D2 are options that are available, and you have a little bit of girth on those handles. As you can see, it's not a super slim carry, so you get a pretty robust feel in the hand, and yet something that can fit into a very narrow space in the pocket. And actually, this is a knife that works very well for me in the way I tend to carry knives, because the pocket that I typically put my knife in tends to share space with some other items. So even something like this Kansept, for me, might be a little too broad to be comfortable with all the time. Not an issue if you're not sharing a pocket, or you're not sharing items in your pocket with your knife. But if you are, something like this can be great. You still have that hard use feel overall. Ball bearing flipper, great action. Liner lock works well. Contouring on that G10 handle there, really good. Another similar option, and this could be, you could see this one as a little bit more of a kind of heavier duty or a hard environment knife in this genre, and that's the Steel Will Sedge. It's got a 4-inch D2 blade. It's about 80 bucks, just under 81. And this is an option if, unlike the ball bearing flipper we just looked at, you want something with a bronze washer-based pivot. Let's say you work in a really dusty or gritty environment. This is going to be a lot easier to keep clean and keep operating smoothly. We still have a liner lock. We still have G10 handles that are contoured for a nice feel, and doesn't take up a ton of room in your pocket. You can still fidget with it. Of course, you can do that reverse flick or open it more deliberately. I've always said Steel Will does about the best job out there with their washer-based pivots in terms of tuning the action. They do a fantastic job. And you got that big, long 4-inch D2 blade. Very capable cutter overall. And this is not a knife that feels like a huge knife. It handles very nimbly in the hand. It's pretty lightweight for its size as well. 4.2 ounces. May not sound ultralight, but in the hand feels very nimble indeed. Another option, if you go with something slightly fancier looking, maybe don't call this a gentleman's knife, but maybe it could be for you, the ArtisanCutlery Archaeo, the large version with the frame lock. Comes in about $250 for this one. We have a 3.8-inch M390 blade, titanium handles with carbon fiber inlay on the front, contoured a little bit, so you've got a good feel, not blocky at all, not a hand-filling grip necessarily because it is fairly narrow overall, but you've got good mastery over that M390 blade. Folds up, very easy to carry indeed, and tons of reach. Ball bearings, flipping action, high flat grind on that blade. A little bit thicker, actually thicker than, I think, than that Kansept we looked at earlier. Yes, it is. So the Kansept, even though it's got that quote-unquote bigger blade, is gonna slice a little bit better than this Archaeo. No matter, still a very awesome option for a big easy knife. So these last three had a bit of that slightly thicker handles on the narrower profile, but what if you want even easier to carry? We can get a long, narrow profile with slim handles to boot, and it's gonna be super easy. Something like the CIVIVI Asticus, $55 and change right now. 3.8-inch blade, D2, high hollow grind, very slim handles. You've essentially got just the liners and the G10 scales. And because they kind of taper in a little bit, you might even want to call these onlays. Kind of slims things down a little bit even further. Very easy to grab a hold of. Doesn't have the same hand-filling grip, but it has a very neutral feel and a very nimble feel, like that Sedge earlier. And then folded up, nice and easy to carry. Ball bearings, flipper, D2, deep carry pocket clip. It is a CIVIVI after all. It goes by their bread and butter playbook very closely. Very slicey, very thin option. What if you want even more? Let's keep going. We can combine that same long, narrow thing with a slim handle, but nothing we've looked at so far has been bigger than 4 inches. What if you want even more reach? Another great affordable knife right here, relatively affordable, it's not super cheap, the Kershaw Strata. This is the smaller version with the 4.5-inch blade. 4.5 inches of D2 steel, in fact. Plenty of slicing reach, thin stock, high flat grind. Normal price about $69. Very nice knife indeed. The bigger version feels significantly bigger. I mean, that one's about a 5.4-inch knife. But the reason I wanted to show you this one is, man, you've got a lot of reach here, but it really doesn't feel like you're dealing with that in the hand or in the pocket. Deep carry pocket clip, very slim. You got G10 on the front, stainless steel frame lock on the back. Hold it here, it doesn't feel like it should be a 4.5-inch blade, and yet flip it out on those KVT bearings and check out that big long slicer that you've got a hold of right there. But ultimately, I think this makes one of the most compelling cases for being a big easy knife because you have that reach, and yet it handles like a much smaller knife. You don't have any kind of weight penalty at all or handling penalty for carrying or for being able to carry such a large blade. All right, next up, another greater than 4-inch blade, the Spyderco Police 4 lightweight. Standard version priced about $129. This one about $175 because this version has the upgraded K390 steel. Great edge retention on a lot of edge, so you've got a lot of performance right here. And another pretty lightweight knife for its size, 4.2 ounces here. Very easy to carry indeed. You've got plenty of grip, a little bit on the thicker side. It's not a super slim knife, and I say that only because we have the original Police here to compare it to, which is heavier but slimmer, as you can see right there when I hold the two up next to each other. You can also see that the Police 4 is just the Police more. Like, it's just a little bit more than the old school Police right here, which is why I'm leaving the standard Police off the table, but I wanted to mention it by way of comparison right there. Tons of reach. I mean, come on right here. Great slicing geometry here as well, not a thick, chunky blade. Safe with that nice lock back, and a little bit on the wider side because it is a Spyderco and you typically have that opening hole to deal with, but still not a huge commitment to carry. In fact, if we're going edge retention for edge retention's sake alone, let me compare this to the 4MAX we looked at the beginning. Okay, blade length is definitely shorter. Sharpened edge is actually pretty close. You might even have a skosh more thanks to the belly on the 4MAX itself, but you're gonna be able to cut more efficiently and cut longer with this Spyderco at top. You're not obviously gonna be able to smash through things like you could with the 4MAX, but what do you need your knife for? Make your decision on that in that sort of situation. But great, great big easy knife right here. Another point of comparison, because I know people are gonna ask about it, the Native Chief is another decent one. A little bit thicker feeling thanks to the thicker G10 scales right there, but still very easy to carry. But again, Police more. Police gives you a little bit more than the Native Chief, which is why it gets to be the prime example here. But even the Endura would be a great big easy knife. One more greater than 4-inch bladed big easy knife. We have the SOCP folder from Benchmade. It comes in about $180. 4.5-inch blade, D2 steel in this case. We have Benchmade's CF Elite handle material, which is a carbon fiber reinforced nylon, which gives you this kind of graphite look, and they've given it a little bit of texture too. Weight on this one is 4.1 ounces. Super slim, very lightweight in nature. I mean, check out how that knife folds up in the pocket. It's virtually a stiletto, essentially. We've got a glass breaker here at the back. You have Benchmade's axis lock, and you have a thumb plate here for opening. Completely ambidextrous all around, reversible clip to boot. A lot of reach there, and of course, you've got a lot of tactical capabilities or a lot of tactical considerations in the design of this knife from Greg Thompson, who designed it as such, but still a great utilitarian shape as well. Two more to kind of round things off. We're gonna scale back the size just a little bit and show you these knives right here. I think offer a lot of length. You've got a 4-inch blade, and similarly to the Strata that we looked at a little bit earlier, these handle like small knives despite having a big knife blade or a big blade. More than anything else here on the table, these two here, the Benchmade Fact. I don't know why I almost called it a Kershaw. 3.95-inch blade, S30V, comes in about $202. You've got black milled aluminum scales, tons of length, not tons of girth in the hand, in the pocket. It just has that nice agile feel. Handles like a small knife. What's the weight on this one, since we're looking at weights here? 3.24 ounces. Feels solid, makes a great letter or package opener. Certainly some self-defensive capabilities in this one too, but you would never look at this, at least on a photo and maybe even in hand, and think, hey, that's a big knife. But that's a 4-inch blade, ladies and gentlemen. Very cool. And last, but very much not least, we have a Boker, the Urban Trapper Grand. And this is a big knife blade, 3.8 inches, and this is a knife that handles small. Folds up super small, titanium handles, nice and slim and easy in and out of the pocket. VG10 blade, nice flicking action with that flipper right there. Truly a big, easy gentleman's knife, if you want to get right down to it. One that would look good in jeans bumming around town too, with not so gentlemanly a situation, but tell me those don't offer a ton of capability, both of these knives, without being some big chunky thing that you're never gonna wanna carry. Because after all, the knife's no good if you don't wanna carry it in your pocket. So they always say when talking about a survival knife that the best survival knife is the one you have on you, so don't pick something you're not gonna wanna carry. We're not talking survival knives for sure here, but the same definitely applies. Anyway, hope this was interesting. Hope it let you see a little bit into sort of the behind the scenes, the sort of things we talk about sometimes here at the Knife Center. Love to hear your thoughts on these knives. What are some of your own big easy knife picks? Leave those down in the comments as well, please. If you want to get your hands on any of these, links in the description will take you over to KnifeCenter.com, and make sure you remember our Knife Rewards program, because if you're going to be buying a knife, you might as well be earning some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.